Don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me." This wasn't just an expression of loyalty, it was a total transformation. Ruth, a Moabite, a foreigner, chooses to leave everything behind and embrace Naomi's people, Naomi's land, and most importantly, Naomi's God. Dear listeners, think about that for a moment. Ruth, a Moabite woman from a nation known for pagan worship, is willing to leave it all behind. What drives a person to make such a bold choice? It's a decision rooted in love, faith, and the belief that there's more to life than what we see. Have you ever wondered how far loyalty can take you? What would you be willing to sacrifice for the people you love? And what if your act of faith could change the course of history? Well, today, we're going to explore the remarkable story of a woman who did just that. Ruth, the Moabite widow who left everything behind and found herself at the center of an extraordinary story of love, redemption, and legacy. Moreover, her story is a testament to how God can take anyone, regardless of background or nationality, and weave them into His plan. Thanks for being here, and if you find this content helpful, please like, share, and subscribe to support our channel. Now, let's begin. Our story begins in a time of famine. Bethlehem, the house of bread, ironically has no food. An Israelite man named Elimelech, along with his wife Naomi and their 2 sons, are forced to leave their homeland to survive. They travel to a foreign country, Moab. Ruth 1 verse 1 states, "In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. So a man from Bethlehem in Judah, together with his wife and 2 sons, went to live for a while in the country of Moab. So Elimelech makes the decision to move his family to Moab out of sheer necessity. In ancient Israel, a famine would have been devastating, especially in an agricultural society that relied heavily on the land's produce. As the head of his household, Elimelech feels the responsibility to ensure the survival of his wife, Naomi, and their 2 sons. The famine in Bethlehem leaves him with few options, and Moab presents a chance to find food and stability for his family. But Moab isn't just any neighboring nation. Despite being nearby, Moab is culturally and religiously distinct from Israel, and had a complicated history with Israel, dating back to the time of Lot, Abraham's nephew. However, for Elimelech, the need to provide for his family outweighs these concerns. Just when they thought they had found safety in Moab, tragedy strikes. Elimelech, the pillar of the family, dies, leaving Naomi devastated and alone in a foreign land. Yet, life doesn't stop. Mahlon and Chilion, Naomi's sons, marry Moabite women. And here, in this unlikely setting, we first meet Ruth. Ruth's introduction in the Bible is brief at first. In Ruth 1 verse 4 we read, "They married Moabite women, one named Orpah and the other Ruth." This is where we are first introduced to Ruth, though at this point we have no idea that this Moabite woman would soon make a decision that would change everything. Ruth marries Mahlon, one of Naomi's sons, and begins her married life in Moab. But the hardship doesn't stop with the death of Naomi's husband, Elimelech. After about 10 years, both of Naomi's sons, Mahlon and Chilion, die as well, leaving Ruth and Orpah as widows alongside Naomi. Now, imagine this. Naomi is crushed, living in a foreign land, with no husband, no sons, and no future. At this moment, Naomi finds herself devastated. But then, she hears a glimmer of hope, news that the famine in Bethlehem is over. Word spreads that God has provided for His people, bringing food and abundance to the land. This news stirs something in Naomi. With nothing left for her in Moab, no family to depend on, she decides to return to her homeland. Bethlehem, once a place of scarcity, now offers her a chance at survival and the possibility of rebuilding her life within her community. So, Naomi begins her journey back to Bethlehem, accompanied by her two daughters-in-law, Ruth and Orpah. Although Naomi is grieving and has no male protector, this act of returning is a step of faith, showing her trust in God's provision. The women set out together on the road to Judah, representing both physical and emotional journeys. At some point during the journey, Naomi stops and urges Ruth and Orpah to return to Moab. She realizes that life will be hard for her, especially as an older widow. She also recognizes the difficulties of life in Bethlehem for two young Moabite women. Naomi lovingly releases them from any sense of obligation toward her, asking them to return to their own families in Moab, where they might have better chances to remarry and rebuild their lives. She blesses them, asking that God show them kindness, just as they had shown to her and their deceased husbands. Naomi prays that Ruth and Orpah will find a place of security, provision, and peace in the home of future husbands. She understands that remarriage would be the best way for them to secure their future in that society. Naomi's farewell kiss symbolizes her release of them, while the loud weeping shows the deep bond of love and sorrow shared between the three women. This was not an easy parting for any of them. Despite Naomi's instructions, both Ruth and Orpah initially refuse to leave her. They are both loyal to Naomi and express their desire to return with her to Bethlehem, choosing to stay by her side despite the uncertainty awaiting them in Judah. Naomi, however, insists that they return to Moab. She appeals to practicality, recognizing that her age prevents her from having any more sons who could become husbands for Ruth and Orpah under the custom of levirate marriage, which required a brother of a deceased man to marry the widow to continue the family line. In Ruth 1 verses 11 to 13, Naomi paints a realistic picture for her daughters-in-law, urging them to consider their future prospects, which would be better in Moab. But Naomi said, "Return home, my daughters. Why would you come with me? Am I going to have any more sons who could become your husbands? Return home, my daughters. I am too old to have another husband. Even if I thought there was still hope for me, even if I had a husband tonight and then gave birth to sons, would you wait until they grew up? Would you remain unmarried for them? No, my daughters. It is more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand has turned against me." In Ruth 1 verses 11 to 13, this passage captures Naomi's deep grief and her selfless love for Ruth and Orpah. Orpah, though reluctant, eventually agrees and stays behind in Moab. But Ruth makes a bold and unexpected choice. She refuses to leave Naomi. Not only that, she makes a declaration that would echo through history. And this declaration marks the beginning of Ruth's remarkable journey. In Ruth 1 verses 16 to 17, she says to Naomi, "Don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me." This is where Ruth's defining moment comes. She refuses to leave Naomi's side. And it's not just about staying with her mother-in-law. Ruth pledges her life to Naomi's people and to Naomi's God, the God of Israel. In other words, she's leaving behind everything familiar to her homeland, her culture, and her family. This wasn't just an expression of loyalty, it was a total transformation. Now, Ruth and Naomi make the long journey back to Bethlehem. After a long and heart-wrenching journey, Naomi and Ruth finally arrive in Bethlehem. Imagine the scene, a small town buzzing with curiosity as the two women, returning from a foreign land, step into their old life. Naomi, once a joyful wife and mother, is now a widow who feels empty, calling herself Mara, meaning bitter. But Ruth, she's a Moabite, a foreigner in a land where people view her heritage with suspicion. The Israelites had historical animosities with the Moabites, so Ruth's presence could evoke mixed feelings among the locals. Despite the challenges, Ruth does not shy away from her new reality. Instead, she steps forward with determination and resilience. Understanding the dire situation she and Naomi face, Ruth takes the initiative to provide for them. She decides to glean in the fields, a practice allowed under Israelite law, where the poor and foreigners could collect leftover grain after the harvesters had finished. This task, however, is not without its risks. For a foreign woman like Ruth, gleaning could be dangerous due to the potential for mistreatment or harassment in a male-dominated environment. Yet, Ruth bravely engages in this humble work. Her actions demonstrate her strong character and loyalty, setting the stage for the unfolding of her remarkable story in Bethlehem. And this is where she catches the eye of Boaz, a wealthy landowner, and not just any landowner. Boaz happens to be a relative of Naomi's late husband, making him a potential kinsman redeemer. In ancient Israel, a kinsman redeemer was a male relative who had the responsibility to marry a widow and preserve the family line. Boaz notices Ruth's hard work. He asks his workers about Ruth and learns that she's come back with Naomi to take care of her. Ruth 2 verses 5-6 state, Boaz asked the overseer of his harvesters, "Who does that young woman belong to?" The overseer replied, "She is the Moabite who came back from Moab with Naomi." This verse shows Boaz's curiosity about Ruth. He is impressed by Ruth's diligence and her loyalty to Naomi. He shows her kindness and protection, allowing her to gather grain from his fields safely. This is where things take an interesting turn. Naomi, realizing that Boaz is a potential redeemer, devises a plan. She encourages Ruth to approach Boaz and express her desire for him to act as their kinsman redeemer, a role that could provide them both with security. The verse that reflects Naomi's encouragement to Ruth and her plan for Ruth to approach Boaz at the threshing floor is found in Ruth 3, verses 1-4. One day Ruth's mother-in-law Naomi said to her, "My daughter, I must find a home for you, where you will be well provided for. Now Boaz, with whose women you have worked, is a relative of ours. Tonight he will be winnowing barley on the threshing floor. Wash, put on perfume, and get dressed in your best clothes. Then go down to the threshing floor, but don't let him know you are there until he has finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, note the place where he is lying. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down. He will tell you what to do." Naomi plays a crucial role here, acting as both a mentor and a guide. After the tragedies they face, losing their husbands, Naomi recognizes that their situation requires bold action for survival and security. Her counsel becomes a pivotal point in Ruth's journey, influencing Ruth's decisions and ultimately changing both of their lives. Ruth follows Naomi's advice, saying, "I will do whatever you say." As the moon casts a soft glow over the threshing floor, Ruth approaches Boaz. Dressed in her finest garments, she moves quietly, her heart pounding with both fear and hope. Under the cover of night, she gently uncovered Boaz's feet and lay down, a gesture laden with symbolism. This act signals her plea for his protection and his role as her kinsman redeemer, a bold move that echoed her unwavering faith and courage. When Boaz wakes up and sees Ruth, he's startled but also impressed. He recognizes her courage and loyalty. He tells her, "The Lord bless you, my daughter. This kindness is greater than that which you showed earlier. You have not run after the younger men, whether rich or poor." Boaz expresses his admiration for Ruth's loyalty and kindness, particularly in her decision to seek him as her kinsman redeemer rather than pursuing younger men. However, there's a twist. He agrees to marry Ruth, but first, there's a legal matter to resolve. Boaz informs Ruth that there's another relative who has the first right to redeem Naomi's family line. This means Boaz must go to the town gate to settle the matter legally before he can marry Ruth. The next day, Boaz goes to the town gate, a public place where legal matters are settled. There, he meets with the closer relative to discuss the redemption of Naomi's property and the right to marry Ruth. Boaz presents the opportunity to the closer relative, explaining the situation regarding Naomi and the land. The relative initially expresses interest in redeeming the land, but upon learning that marrying Ruth is part of the deal, he declines, fearing it could jeopardize his own inheritance. This opens the door for Boaz. He steps in as Ruth's redeemer, securing not only the land but also his place in her heart. In front of the elders and all the people, he proudly announces, "Today you are witnesses that I have bought from Naomi all the property of Elimelech, Kilion, and Mahlon. I have also acquired Ruth the Moabite, Mahlon's widow, as my wife, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property, so that his name will not disappear from among his family or from the town records." This moment is not just about legal matters, it's about love, commitment, and redemption. Finally, Ruth and Boaz marry, and their story takes an even more remarkable turn. They have a son, Obed, who becomes the grandfather of King David. Yes, Ruth, the foreigner, the Moabite woman, becomes the great-grandmother of Israel's greatest king and is included in the lineage of Jesus Christ himself. Thus, a Moabite woman from a pagan land becomes a key part of God's redemptive plan for all humanity. So what's the lesson here? Ruth's story is about loyalty, faith, and God's providence. She was an outsider, someone who could have easily been overlooked. But her faithfulness to Naomi, her embrace of the God of Israel, and her courage to act when it mattered most led her to become part of God's plan for redemption, not just for her and Naomi, but for all of Israel, and ultimately for the world. Ruth's story reminds us that no matter where we come from or what our background is, God can use anyone who is willing to trust Him. Ruth was a woman who turned from the idols of her people to the one true God, and because of her faith, she was richly rewarded. And that's it for today's video. If you enjoyed this exploration, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more intriguing content. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.